Tonight on Bridge City News, a winter storm watch has been issued for southwestern Alberta. Are we prepared? The Lethbridge candidate for the Green Party would like to see all drugs decriminalized. The Green Party's Stephanie Watson has the details. And it's Friday, which means another Movie Mill Minute. We'll have details of great new films playing at the Mill this weekend, including the Christian movie Overcomer.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening, thanks so much for joining us. Old Man Winter will be paying us another visit this weekend. Environment Canada has issued a winter storm watch. We're expecting up to 30 centimeters of snow in many areas of southwestern Alberta, including Pincher Creek, Waterton, and the Crow's Nest Pass. A reminder from the City of Lethbridge today that as the temperature drops, bridges and on-ramps will become very slippery. The city also says to be sure you maintain a safe distance from the vehicle in front of you, stay a safe distance behind snowplows and sand trucks, and a reminder to never pass a snowplow or a sand truck. And when it comes to plowing and sanding, the city will be making some of the major routes a priority first, including Whoop Up Drive, University Drive, Métis Trail, and Scenic Drive. During winter road conditions, the city will also lower the speed limit on Whoop Up from 90 to 60 kilometers an hour. As for residential streets, they are not plowed unless they are impassable for emergency vehicles. Today is the day millions of people around the world were marching in a global climate strike. Young climate strikers took to the streets demanding the end of fossil fuels. A Lethbridge march was being organized by 16-year-old Sydney Whiting with Climate Strike YQL, who were set to protest in front of Lethbridge City Hall. Many are inspired by the actions of Swedish teen climate activist Greta Thunberg, who met with Liberal leader Justin Trudeau earlier today in Montreal.
In my wonderful conversation with Greta this morning, we talked directly about the need to do more, much more. I thanked her for the amount of people that her call to action has mobilized. Young people here in Montreal, across the country and around the world, who are saying, yes, governments need to do more. We've done a lot, but we are going to do more. That's why we've put forward ambitious targets to protect 25% of our land, 25% of our oceans up to until 2025. We know that we can do more by planting 2 billion trees and using the power of nature to fight climate change. Trees are remarkable. They pull carbon out of the atmosphere. They're renewable and they're sustainable, and eventually they even recycle themselves. All we have to do is plant the first one.
The federal party leaders were back on the campaign trail today. The NDP's Jagmeet Singh blasted Trudeau's record on affordable housing, and the Conservative leader Andrew Scheer said if his party is elected, he would launch a judicial inquiry into the SNC-Lavalin scandal.
Justin Trudeau lied to Canadians. On the very first day the story came to light, he said the story was not true. That was a lie. He said he never pressured Jody Wilson-Raybould. That was a lie. He said she never came forward to him with her concerns. That was also a lie. A new Conservative government will launch a judicial inquiry into Justin Trudeau's corruption scandal. Anytime a politician interferes in an independent court case, that is a very serious issue.
And we've got a housing crisis across Canada. Given this housing crisis, you'd think that Mr. Trudeau would take it seriously. Well, instead of taking it seriously, he says on one hand the economy is doing really well, but he's invested 19% less than Mr. Harper as percentage of GDP in housing. 19% less than Mr. Harper. How is that a response to the seriousness of the crisis?
Stats Canada says by the year 2030, seniors will make up about 23% of our population. Issues like pharmacare, pension plans, and military support have been expressed by seniors and are at the forefront of the upcoming federal election. Ainsley O'Reilly was at the Northbridge Senior Centre earlier today, where concerns were being raised to all of the local candidates.
The National Association of Federal Retirees is made up of 178,000 members, and the Lethbridge chapter hosted Friday's forum. Candidates from each party spoke about their platforms for seniors and later answered questions. Pharmacare was a popular topic. The NDP and Green Party have promised universal pharmacare plans, while the Liberals and Conservatives laid out different approaches.
increasing that amount that is being transferred to the provinces. Unfortunately, the Liberals actually cut that amount back, and so we need to renew that funding and increase it, which again, that's our commitment, is to increase that funding by 3% each and every year.
One of the Liberal government priorities is going to be implementing the National Pharmacare Plan, looking to do this into 2021, work through the details of that plan, saving a lot of money on prescriptions for Canadians, as well as for Canada overall, to reduce healthcare costs over time.
I talked to an elderly lady who told me that she had a stroke because she was in a car accident, and now her prescription medication is costing her $1,500 a month. That's $18,000 a year.
The Liberal government says they will increase old age security by 10% once Canadians turn 75 and increase the Canada Pension Plan by 25%. Conservative MP Rachel Harder shared her party's plans for making every dollar count for seniors.
Things like removing GST on home heating will go a long way for them. Taking the carbon tax off, which increases the cost of food and clothing and, heating a person's home. Get that out of there.
The Christian Heritage Party claims they are the only party that is pro-life and says they are strongly advocating against euthanasia.
They feel lonely, they feel unsupported, they don't feel like they can have their pain taken care of, and we start from a place where every life is valuable.
In Alberta, it's predicted that the population of seniors will more than double by 2046. The future of elderly Canadians will be impacted at the ballot box on October 21st. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
We're about 3 weeks away now from the federal election. Make sure you tune into BCN for Your Vote 2019. Our live election coverage begins October 21st at 7 p.m. The Lethbridge Green Party candidate Stephanie Watson stopped by our studio recently and says part of their platform is to decriminalize all drugs.
So the focus can be actually put towards the people who are doing it illegally, like smuggling it in illegally, selling it, making it illegally, right? Mm-hmm. That's where the focus needs to go. Right now, the focus is on the users, and that doesn't help at all.
Catch the full interview with Green Party's Stephanie Watson coming up in the second half of our show. Another part of the Green Party platform is free post-secondary education for all. I asked an associate professor at the University of Calgary if that is economically possible. Trevor Toome says, sure, we'd just be looking at a major tax increase.
If we were to make tuition free, and here the Parliamentary Budget Office did cost that campaign promise, that would be about $10 billion per year. So in terms of GST points, it would be about 1 to 1.5 points on the GST. So it is a significant increase in spending.
Mr. Toome will have lots more to say about the various parties' policies and how they will impact Albertans coming up after business news. New numbers released by the Federal Finance Department says Ottawa posted a deficit of $1.6 billion over the first 4 months of this year. It said spending was $9.1 billion higher, which offset a $4.2 billion gain in government revenues. The report says the boost in federal spending was due to increases in direct program expenses and transfers to other levels of government. The Liberal government's spring budget forecast a deficit of $19.8 billion for the 2019 to 2020 fiscal year. Close to 100 people took to the streets of Lethbridge today to promote equality and raise awareness for people with disabilities. The 10th annual Citizen Walkabout started at City Hall and wrapped up at Galt Gardens. BCN's Loris Alexander attended the rally, where residents raised awareness on accessibility.
Participants of the Citizen Walkabout carried signs with messages important to their everyday life. Everyone involved took the time to support one another and present a voice for people of all abilities.
Today we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Citizen Walkabout, and it's just so important to the community of Lethbridge to celebrate the different abilities that exist within our community. We have many individuals who live with a disability, but they have so many talents and gifts to bring to the table and to contribute to our community and make it a vibrant place. And so it's important to celebrate that today.
Mark Davids, Executive Director of the Southern Alberta Individualized Planning Association, says the City of Lethbridge has taken several measures to improve accessibility and has continuously supported the Citizen Walkabout.
Everyone has different skills and abilities, and everyone is valuable in one way or another. And so the City of Lethbridge does a really good job of trying to help people feel included, especially not just events in and around the city, but they've been recently working on things like the Mobility and Accessibility Master Plan, stuff like that. But there's always work to be done. It's one of those things where you always got to be vigilant, always got to be working at it to make sure that everyone is included and everyone has a chance to have a voice.
They still need to be worked on with a few buildings, but I think it's coming together, just making sure everybody can get in places with people with wheelchairs, walkers, and stuff, and even with the buses as well.
All proceeds raised will support the South Region Self-Advocacy Network. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Beginning October 7th, 5 registered midwives will be joining the Chinook Regional Hospital's maternal health care team. Midwifery will give women with low-risk pregnancies the option of choosing a registered midwife as their care provider for prenatal, birthing, and postnatal care. Chinook Hospital is hosting an information session on midwifery services next Monday from 5 till 7 p.m. at the County Hall. Alberta's Minister of Health, Tyler Shandro, says more and more Alberta families are turning to midwives for maternal and prenatal care, so there was a need. There are currently 145 midwives working at AHS facilities across the province. Former Provincial Health Minister and former Alberta Party leader Stephen Mandel is the new board member with Alberta Health Services. The UCP government says Mandel will bring expertise in business and government and will help guide spending in addiction, mental health, and palliative care. The UCP also announced that Edmonton businesswoman Heidi Overgaard will also be added to the board. Officials say she will bring a solid rural community viewpoint to planning and decision-making. A video has been released from the mother of a man in 2008 pleading with the public to help bring her son's killer to justice. Andrea Tethers says her son made some mistakes, but had the potential to become a fine young man. A man was charged in the death of Alan Tether, who was killed in a parkade of a condo complex almost 12 years ago. Police believe, however, that there were others who were involved in the shooting. It was a day of retribution. Now that's what Alec Manassian told police as the motive behind driving down a Toronto sidewalk on April 23rd of 2018 and killing 10 people. He told a detective that the retribution was in connection with years of sexual rejection.
On Halloween of 2013, I was attending a house party, and I walked in and attempted to socialize with some girls. However, they all laughed at me and held the arms of the big guys instead.
Now, what are you thinking while you're in the van?
I'm thinking that this is it. This is the day of retribution.
Okay. And anything else in your mind?
Just that. That's the only thing that's in my mind. It's just burning in my mind.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. State Department did not engage in improper activity with Ukraine. Pompeo made the remarks on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly.
Each of the actions that were undertaken by State Department officials was entirely appropriate and consistent with the objective that we've had certainly since this new government has come into office. We have tried to use this opportunity to create a better relationship between the United States and Ukraine, to build on the opportunities to tighten our relationship, to help end corruption in Ukraine. This is what President Zelensky ran on. We're hopeful that we can help him execute and achieve that. Be a good thing for the Ukraine, to be a good thing for Europe. It would push back against Russia in important ways as well if we could achieve that objective.
Hillary Clinton said the man who beat her in the 2016 election, Donald Trump, poses a clear and present danger to the future of the United States. Clinton made the comments yesterday at an event in Washington, D.C.
We have known who Donald Trump is for some time now. We knew he was a corrupt businessman who cheated people. We knew that his campaign invited foreign adversaries to tamper with our elections. And now we know that in the course of his duties as our president, he's endangered us all by putting his personal and political interests ahead of the interests of the American people.
Closer to home, zoo officials in Calgary are hoping hormones will help a pregnant giraffe become a mother. For the 4th time, Amara is expecting, but her previous pregnancies do not end well, with all calves dying. A decline in the hormone progesterone is believed to have been the culprit. Staff at the zoo will be giving Amara some supplements. Officials say the hormone has been used successfully on rhinos in the past, but there are no records of such treatment used on a giraffe. There is new evidence which suggests healthy people have had a severe reaction to germs found in the mouths of dogs and cats. As we hear in this next report, researchers say they have found a possible genetic link.
It's hard to regard Ellie as a menace.
She loves kids, she loves puppies, other dogs.
But bacteria that could live in Ellie's mouth could have caused her owner, Greg Manteifel, to develop a sickness that caused him to lose part of his arms and legs, skin on his nose, and part of his upper lip. Capnocytophaga is commonly found in the saliva of cats and dogs and almost never leads to people getting sick unless the person has a compromised immune system.
That I was healthy my whole life, never had anything wrong with me till 48 years old, and then just something like this to hit me that quick and hard, it was kind of difficult to deal with.
There now could be an answer. Manteifel is taking part in a study by Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Over the last 7 years, researchers have tracked down 5 relatively healthy people who came in contact with dogs before developing a severe reaction to capnocytophaga.
So this patient, he had adopted a puppy.
They discovered the victims had a gene connected with their immune system that was working differently.
We know that not everybody with these genetic changes would definitely go on to develop capno or other infections, but we're identifying this as a risk factor that could be relevant for those people's management, as well as just giving an answer why this happened. For many of our patients, including Greg, this is a real medical mystery.
Right now it's a theory, and they're looking for other possible risk factors.
You know, the stakes are high, and the findings of our research, we think, has implications for how people are treated and managed, as well as how they're vaccinated. And how they're cared for after dog bites or other possible presentations of infections.
You know it's going to throw your balance off.
Manteifel is waiting for test results that could confirm whether he fits in with the others. Meanwhile, he's not one to sit around. He's vacuuming, four-wheel driving, and generally getting used to his new prosthetics.
A little easier with that one.
And soon he'll progress from short leg prosthetics to full-sized ones. In the end, Manteifel doesn't blame Ellie for anything.
We didn't even bother testing her because we weren't going to get rid of her if it was her that caused it anyway.
Loyalty that runs both ways in this relationship. Carrie Antelfinger, Associated Press.
There are more great family movies playing at the Mill this weekend, including the Christian film Overcomer. With more, here's Len Benning with another Movie Mill Minute.
From across the pond, we have The Queen's Corgi, an animated film that was so fun, my granddaughter spent the evening role-playing. One would be the Queen, one would be the Corgi. It's a story about Max, a Corgi who goes missing from Buckingham Palace, and he's got to find his way back, including making his way through Dog Fight Club.
Our real battle is with fear.
I'm too fluffy to die.
We conquer it. We set ourselves free.
It may have a strange name, but the Peanut Butter Falcon is 2 thumbs up. Shia LaBeouf stars alongside Zach, an individual blessed with Down syndrome. He spends every day trying to escape from the nursing home because he has a dream of becoming a wrestler.
Tell her I'm gonna give you all of my wishes for my birthday.
I made a promise to him, give him that wrestling school in Aden.
No, we're not gonna hop on your little raft and cruise around down the river.
Hey, Eleanor, I don't wanna go home.
Oh!
And in the faith-based genre, we have Overcomer. John's dream of a state championship for his basketball team come crashing down when the local factory closes down and hundreds of families are moving away. He's reluctantly assigned to coach the track and field team, which has one sole member.
I had one girl show up and she's got asthma.
Oh, you mean Hannah Scott. Do you enjoy running?
It's really the only thing I'm good at.
Why have a season with one runner?
One runner matters.
Look like great movies once again. Environment Canada issued a winter storm watch for southwestern Alberta. Might be a good time to take in a movie this weekend. How much snow are we talking about? A complete look at the weather picture is coming up. A winter storm watch was issued by Environment Canada earlier today. Expect 15 to 30 centimeters in many regions, including Pincher Creek, Waterton, and the Crow's Nest Pass. Tonight in Lethbridge, expect periods of snow mixed with rain and a low near -1. Tomorrow, more snow developing with a high of only 0. Snow showers and 0 again on Sunday. Monday, more of the white stuff and a high near +1. The warming trend will begin on Tuesday. Expect the sun to return and the temperature increase to 7 degrees. Wednesday, lots of sunshine and a balmy high of 14. Even warmer with a high of 15 degrees expected on Thursday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 18 degrees and an average low of 3. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1967 at 32 degrees, and the record low was -5 in 1972. Sunrise was at 7:24, sunset at 7:20. Looking at tomorrow's national forecast now, Victoria will be mainly sunny at 17, Vancouver will be 1 degree cooler and partly cloudy. Calgary's also under a winter storm watch. Tomorrow expect snow and a high of 0. Expect rain mixed with snow in Edmonton and a high of 5 on Saturday. It'll be partly cloudy at 5 degrees as well in Regina. A mixture of sun and cloud and 7 for Saskatoon. Mostly cloudy and 10 degrees for Winnipeg tomorrow. It is much warmer in the central part of the country. Toronto should receive some light showers, but a high near 24 degrees. Rain and 22 for Ottawa. Light showers and 18 degrees for Montreal. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick should receive light rain at 20. Halifax, Nova Scotia will be mainly sunny and 20 as well. Expect a few clouds at 19 in Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect light rain and a high near 13 degrees tomorrow. Rogers Communications says a new customer call center in Kelowna, BC will help create about 350 new jobs. Company officials say the center should handle about 1 million interactions with Rogers and Fido customers a year, eventually growing to about 500 employees. The company said in a news release it will open the center in the city's Landmark district and will begin hiring next spring. Montreal-based Cirque du Soleil says it wants to introduce animal-like robots at its live shows. It's in talks with robot maker Boston Dynamics to make it happen. The four-legged Spot robot, which began as a military-funded research project, has now become a YouTube star showcasing its ability to walk, jump, and gallop. Boston Dynamics says Spot is being mass-produced and being used for monitoring construction sites or inspecting energy facilities. Cirque du Soleil says it is still evaluating Spot's potential in live entertainment. Users of Alexa, Amazon's digital assistant, can now request that recordings of their voice commands be automatically deleted. The company says it saves commands to improve service for the user, but the practice has raised concerns with privacy experts. They believe the recordings could end up in the wrong hands, especially since Amazon uses people and not machines as reviewers. Tech companies have been reviewing their practices in light of those concerns. One of the Bank of England's top policymakers says interest rates may have to be slashed even if Britain does not leave the EU on October the 31st. Officials say the British economy has weakened from high Brexit uncertainties and softer global growth. They say even if the UK avoids leaving the European Union without a deal, uncertainty over Brexit will likely depress UK growth for quite some time. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX is down 96 points on the day to 16,694. The Dow Jones is down almost 71 points to 26,820. And the NASDAQ was also down on the day 91 points to 7939. The S&P 500 was down almost 16 points to 2961. Oil was down 25 cents today to 56.16 per barrel. Natural gas was down 5 cents to $2.40. Gold was down $7.70 to $14.97 an ounce. And silver was down 28 cents to $17.54 per ounce. Wheat is at $205 per metric ton, barley's at $200, canola's at $4.45, and corn is at $277 per metric ton. Live cattle is up $2.08 to $105.03. Feeder cattle is also up $1.23 to $144.33. Lean hogs were up $1.05 to $65.28, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly on the day to 75.49 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, a winter storm watch is in effect for southwestern Alberta. 15 to 30 centimeters of snow is expected over the next few days in Lethbridge, Pincher Creek, Waterton, and the Crow's Nest Pass. Be careful out there. How would you like to receive a free post-secondary education? How about having all drugs decriminalized? Those are some of the party platforms the Green Party is pushing. The Lethbridge candidate for the Green Party, Stephanie Watson, has details next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News Community Calendar. Award-winning author Daniel Handler, otherwise known as Lemony Snicket, will be the special guest speaker for the Lethbridge Public Library's Author Talk, book signing, and Q&A session on Saturday, October 2nd at 7 p.m. at the Yates Memorial Theatre. Admission is free, but tickets are required. Pick up yours today at the library's main branch customer service desk. For more information, visit lethlib.ca. Come out and support a worthy cause. The Blue Rain Ranch Animal Assisted Therapy Foundation Benefit Dinner and Auction is taking place on Saturday, October 19th at the Community Hall in Fort Macleod, with cocktails being served at 5:30 p.m. and dinner beginning at 6. Come dressed in your best Western wear and enjoy live music by Duo Grand, Fiddle and Guitar. All proceeds to support access for low-income trauma and abuse victims to counseling and animal-assisted therapy. For tickets, call 403-894-9160. And for event details, visit bridgesofhope.com. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
We are in the thick of a federal election campaign, and we want to hear from all of the Lethbridge candidates. Today, joining me in studio is Stephanie Watson, the federal Green Party candidate for the Lethbridge riding. Steph, welcome to BCN.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
So why don't you explain to our viewers a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, so my name's Stephanie Watson. I have no A in Stephanie, which throws some people off. And it's great, though. It's a little bit of uniqueness. And my pronouns are they, them, and I just like to get that out there to make sure that people don't make the mistake of misgendering, which can happen, but hey, we're all learning, right?
Mm-hmm. So when you're not out door knocking, what do you do for a living? To help pay the bills?
To help pay the bills.
Right?
That's a good question. I actually have been starting up the development of my new company, Sherlock & Watson Scientific, for the last year and a half, which has really helped me to better understand the small business world and some of the issues around business and stakeholders and legal legislation and items. So that's been great. I mean, I grew up in a family that had a lot of their own trade, small businesses and stuff, so I learned a lot from that as well, but it's different when it's hands-on.
And you spent a lot of time in central Alberta in Red Deer?
Yeah, so I grew up in Red Deer, and then I moved down here about 17 years ago to start my bachelor's in environmental science, and then I've been here ever since with a couple of jogs out to Red Deer again and Saskatoon, and but always coming back here. So it's become my
Steph,
home.
why make the jump into politics? To some people, it's not a very popular move.
I got to the point where I was finding the representation, the voices just weren't reflecting some of the messaging that I felt and conversations that need to be happening in our country at the federal level, and the responsibility to other candidates and making sure that we actually have these discussions instead of just the taglines, right? Like we need to be having the real discussions during election time, but also around and in between elections.
So climate action, climate change is a big issue, obviously, with the federal election coming up. What is the Green Party's plan to tackle climate change?
Yeah, so my background being environmental science, I actually have a background in climate change. I worked for Environment Canada doing some precipitation analysis, and some of my studies were in climate. And it's a scary thing out there. The new IPCC report just came out. The United Nations are meeting right now in the States. Canada is missing in those talks because we're in an election. And the leaders decided, even though Elizabeth May asked if we could take a break to go and attend this important meeting, none of the other leaders would agree to it. So unfortunately, Canada is not being properly represented down there right now. We're in a climate crisis. We have about 15 months left to be able to start getting the government plans and actions in place to meet our targets to keep us at the 1.5 degrees Celsius that the globe needs to be at.
So sorry, what happens after 15 months?
Well, after 15 months, then we go into faster changes that cost more, ones that don't necessarily allow us to bring everyone forward. We want everyone to be able to move into a green economic transition. We don't want to leave anyone behind. And so it's really important that we get this going, and it's a nonpartisan issue. This needs to be on the forefront of every party. It needs to be on the forefront of every Canadian, every person living here, as well as globally. So
Steph, what do you say to people that believe in climate change, but they say it's more Mother Nature, it's more cyclical, it's not man-made? So what do you say to those people? How do you respond to that? Because a lot of people out there believe that, right?
Unfortunately, yes, and it goes back to this, science is not a belief. Science is a process. We have measures, balances. There's so many different projects that have been out there, research projects, money spent on this, expertise developed in this. And we have the ability to make these changes. And we have the ability of doing that without leaving anyone behind. So the question becomes, why are we afraid for this change? The change won't harm us. But if we don't do anything, that change will. Because we will be having a change. It's just whether we're going to have a proactive change or if we're going to have a reactive. And the reactive is when we're dealing with fallouts from natural disasters, displacement of people, including within Canada, but from outside of Canada as well. There's just all these different issues that pull into this. And it increases poverty rates. It causes issues with our companies and employees because all of a sudden their businesses might not be there or able to sustain them, or employees can't get in to deal with it because of health issues from this or from their houses burning down, so they have to go deal with that. Like, there's just all these different situations that build into this.
So the Green Party believes in a lot of green technology. So how will you help people transition into that field?
Yeah, so green technology is still part of our energy sector. We have all these transferable skill sets from all of our workers who are in oil, gas, and mining that we can move into other sectors very easily with small training programs. And we want the workers to know that we're there to support them and help them with this transition. So the energy sector, in regards to renewable energies and green technologies, is one of the fastest growing ones with long-term sustainable jobs that are also more localized, so then those workers can actually stay in their areas and more at home than having to travel and be away from their families for long periods of time. So it's a different way of doing business. It's not necessarily a bad way of doing business. Many of the oil and gas and mining companies have actually invested in these other technologies as well, right? So we're just looking at moving stuff over. It's a transition. A lot of jobs and sectors transition over time, and oil and gas and mining is one of the ones that it's time to start moving over.
So do you believe the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion will actually be built? Will the shovels go under the ground? The federal government bought it for $4.5 billion, but it seems like death to delay. You know, do you think it'll actually be built?
I hope not. I don't think it's the best option that we have available to us right now.
Do you believe more rail, transporting oil by rail or by ship? Or
ships are also difficult. Rail is as well. We do have quite an extensive pipeline system within Canada already that people forget about.
Yeah, we have tens of thousands of pipes already.
So why aren't we retrofitting those, and why aren't we going back and remediating those and like expanding those ones instead of putting in new ones in new areas that can affect other economies, other people's livelihoods, other natural areas? Canada is one of the few countries that still has a lot of our natural area that helps sustain the natural ecosystems needed. So why are we willing to put those at risk for short-term gain?
How about when it comes to solar and maybe wind farms, the wind turbines? You know, some farmers I've spoken to that have the wind turbines on their land say, we're killing a lot of the birds. The birds are hitting the blades and dying at a fast pace. So we have to protect these migratory birds. Mm-hmm. So what's the solution there?
So there are lots of studies being conducted right now. I can't speak to them directly as I have not been involved with them directly, but it's also bats. Bats are also very susceptible to windmills. So there's lots of research and new innovations coming. The problem is that they're not subsidized, they're not supported like the oil and gas companies and mining companies are. So until we transition that over and make it more of a level playing field, we're not going to see those new methodologies and those new technologies coming in. So one of the things when some of the original wind farms were first built is an analysis of migratory pathways of birds was not taken into account. That is now taken into account, right? So dealing with the silence echo, where like our bats, they do the
Yeah, the sonar, they
Sonar,
bounce off
thank
of
you.
an object so they know the distance.
Yeah,
that
they
they're
know the
traveling?
distance. They can't do that with the windmills the way they're designed. So it's altering those designs slightly so that we can deal with that. But that all requires research and funding in science. And when you've had the funding of science cut and the access to that cut, that reduces our innovation to be able to deal with those problems. But these are easily solvable problems.
One of the promises with the Green Party as well, Steph, is to provide universal pharmacare, including dental care for Canadians. How's that going to be funded? That's huge money.
It is huge money, but something else that's huge money is people missing work and not being able to work due to healthcare, not being able to continue their education or to be able to look for other work because they can't afford their medications, because they're living a less than healthy lifestyle because they're not able to meet their minimum requirements. So by having a pharmacare plan in place, it allows people to be at their healthiest so that they can participate in our society to their fullest.
So how would we pay for that? Taxes going up? Because I know that the Green Party was talking about increased corporate taxes, 15 to 21 points, maybe place a special tax on bank profits. Would you incorporate that somehow or use some of that money to pay for
some of it, but
pharmacare?
also I believe, if I remember correctly, and please double check in our platform as well, because I don't have the best recall, is we're actually looking at designating a certain percent of the GDP of Canada to paying for that kind of stuff. So that's important as well. We're actually looking at legislatively requiring that a certain percentage of money goes directly to that for that purpose.
What about education? Let's talk about that.
Same with the education.
Yeah, education, post-secondary education. What's the Green Party
Post-secondary
plan for students?
For students, it's two-tiered. So we want post-secondary to be free and accessible in college and university, and that's part of that transitioning to a green economy where we have to have a lot of people retrained and stuff. We need to make it accessible. We also need to, it deals with also shortages of healthcare professionals and doctors, right? Finances are a huge barrier. The cost of university is a huge barrier. We have a lot of qualified people and immigrants coming in as well who can fill these positions that need to be filled, but they can't afford to be doing it. So we need to remove that barrier so our society can move forward.
Unfortunately, I know in this lifetime, after raising 2 children as well, nothing is free.
No.
The money has to come from somewhere.
Yep.
So who would pay for the books? Who would pay for all that education? I know when my son was in college, he had to pay $250 for one book.
Yeah.
You know?
So who's paying for it now is our question as well, right?
Well, the students are, right?
Students are.
Student loans.
Their student loans, right? Yeah. And then a lot of those student loans aren't being paid back. They're being forgiven. We have all these bursaries. We have all these grant applications, different types of programs where we can refunnel that money into just the costs of the education instead, right? So it's using the money that's already there as well as taking that money from other locations, such as increasing corporate taxes. Because one of the things I've learned being in business is that you never actually pay that 15 to 21% in taxes because of all the deductions you get. So by increasing that percentage, we're able to bring in some of that money to help pay for this stuff so that employers will get better qualified people, that they're not having to send their employees at their dollar to the school. They can just go get upgraded.
We have an opioid crisis, not just here in Lethbridge, Alberta, around the world it seems like, especially here in North America.
Yeah.
What is the Green Party's plan to deal with the opioid crisis in Canada?
Yeah, it's full action on that. We want to decriminalize drugs.
Decriminalize?
Decriminalize.
So heroin, cocaine,
opioids,
all of it?
All of it.
Fentanyl?
Decriminalized, yep.
Oh, wow.
I mean, fentanyl's used in hospitals as well, right? And decriminalize it so the focus can be actually put towards the people who are doing it illegally, like smuggling it in illegally, selling it, making it illegally, right? Mm-hmm. That's where the focus needs to go. Right now, the focus is on the users, and that doesn't help at all. And then,
but wouldn't decriminalizing cause the rates to go through the roof if all of a sudden it's cool to shoot up with heroin?
No.
Or use cocaine or meth or fentanyl? Don't you think some of those people would experiment like, hey, this is cool now?
People experiment anyways. People are prescribed these by doctors, and that's where we're seeing a lot of the addiction starting is by prescribed drugs. And then once they can no longer get them, but they've already become addicted to them, that's when they turn to the illegal ones. Decriminalizing that allows them to go get the help that they need once we get the supports in place for harm reduction, for intox and detox centers, for recovery programs, counseling. Like, we need about 5 to 7 different types of programs in place to help the people with addictions. Making them criminals is not one of them.
What's the Green Party's plan for reconciliation and bridging that gap with our Indigenous community?
That's very important to the Green Party. The Indigenous community has so much to offer, and we need to really reconcile with our past and acknowledge and meet all the targets under the Truth and Reconciliation document, as well as the international ones. I think it's great that Lethbridge has really been leading away with that. We just recently adopted Oki as our official greeting here in Lethbridge. Welcome.
In Blackfoot, yes.
In Blackfoot, right? The traditional knowledge is amazing and needs to be more accepted into our society. We need to making sure that they're at the table, having their voices properly heard, and so that we can remove these barriers and stigmas that are in place in our society, because we have so much wonderful, talented, and innovative people, and they have so much experience and knowledge.
Stephanie Watson, Green Party candidate for Lethbridge riding. Thanks for joining me in studio today.
Thank
you. The federal election campaign continues with all kinds of big promises to the Canadian public. But are these promises within our budget, and how will they affect our economy? Dr. Trevor Toome, Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Calgary, joins me right now. Trevor, let's start with the differing taxation plans. The Liberals announced they'll not tax the first $15,000 of income, and the Tories will lower the income tax bracket to 13.75%. They seem like very similar plans, but actually framed a little differently.
Yeah, so they are quite similar in terms of their overall size. So they both represent income tax reductions of about $6 billion, a little bit less than $6 billion once they're fully phased in. But there are some important differences between them. So the Conservative proposal to lower that tax rate on the first bracket, that really does benefit every income tax payer in the country because we all pay at least a little bit in that first bracket. The Liberal one differs, though, by increasing the amount of income that you can earn tax-free. That also benefits almost all income tax filers, but there's a little extra nuance there where if you're a single earning family, for example, you can also claim your spouse's basic amount. Or if you're a single parent, you can also claim a kid as equivalent to spouse. So there are some differences that affect families in different ways.
Now, the NDP plan is to increase taxes on wealthy Canadians. How will this actually work out in the long term?
Yeah, this one is, I think, a unique proposal that I find a little concerning. They're proposing to increase or to introduce a wealth tax of 1% on wealth over 20 million. And so that, what concerns me there is that it's fairly easy to move financial investments around across jurisdictions. So the real risk there is that it might lead to some capital flight out of Canada. And the Parliamentary Budget Office was pretty clear that that represents a big source of uncertainty around exactly how much revenue that tax would bring in.
Now, the Green Party would increase corporate taxes from 15% to 21% and would also place a special tax on bank profits. How will that actually impact the economy, Trev?
That's right. So increasing corporate taxes would turn Canada in the other direction from what we've seen historically here over the last few years and what we saw in the United States. And investors do look to the after-tax rate of return on a project. So if you're trying to decide whether to invest in this project or that project, you want to know how much you're going to get from that at the end of the day after taxes. So an increase in the corporate rate will tend to discourage employment. And a tax on financial transactions could have particularly negative consequences for the banking system. So I think those are probably, the Green Party tax proposals are probably the worst, I'd say, is fair for the overall economy in Canada.
Affordable housing seems to be a real issue as well, a party platform. Do they have a plan that would actually improve the housing market?
Yeah, housing affordability is a complicated issue because different cities different provinces experience this issue in different ways. I mean, Calgary and Edmonton actually have pretty affordable real estate, Lethbridge as well, but Vancouver, Toronto, there in those markets, it takes a pretty significant amount of your income to afford owning a home. So for federal policy to play a role, it's really hard because different parts of the country experience it in different ways. So I think we should look less to the federal government and more to municipalities and zoning and ask how city governments can potentially increase housing supply in those cities. Some of the minor things that might affect things on the margin include the Conservatives proposing to increase the length of time that you can hold a mortgage from 25 to 30 years. And that will have the effect of lowering payments each month, making housing more affordable, although it does come at the cost of more interest that you pay as a mortgage holder over the life of that mortgage.
Okay, let's talk now about healthcare. The NDP and the Green Party promised to have universal national pharmacare, including dental, in place by the year 2020. The cost would be enormous. Now, where would the funds come from, and how would this really impact the annual federal budget and overall deficit, Trevor?
Yeah, great question. And first, let's get a sense of scale. So your average Canadian, or Canada as a whole, spends about $1,000 per person on drugs. We're talking about $30 to $35 billion. Now, some of that is already paid by government. So what we're really talking about is incrementally increasing government spending by about $20 billion. So that's significant. And the two parties have not been clear about how they would pay for it. And so you could imagine increasing the GST. How much would you have to increase it by to fund a program of that scale? By about 3% or so. So we'd have to go from 5 to 8. And if you didn't want to raise revenue through tax increases to fund that spending, then yeah, it would contribute to the deficit and debt over time. So I think, it's a proposal certainly worth talking about, but in the context of how are you going to pay for it? And that's not exactly the conversation we're having at the moment.
There have been some major promises on climate change as well. Let's start with the carbon tax, which will be going up. How will this really impact our economy?
Yeah, so there's estimates on that from the federal government. So we have a carbon tax in some of the backstop provinces of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and New Brunswick. Alberta, depending on how the election goes, would see that in January. And estimates are that each $10 per ton that you increase that carbon tax by, overall Canadian GDP growth might be about 0.1% lower. So that accumulates through time. So maybe the economy by 2022 would be about 0.4% lower. So there is a negative consequence of the carbon tax, although I'd note that any action to lower emissions is going to come with a cost, and that there's really no free lunch here. And so we should be evaluating policies in terms of their cost effectiveness and how cheaply they can lower emissions. And some proposals are more expensive than others.
So apparently the Green Party is promising to basically stop any further expansion of the oil and gas industry and replace it with green technology. They say this will create a whole bunch of new jobs, but how do you see it?
Yeah, so I would like to see the analysis, I guess, that led them to that conclusion. I suspect it is more of a talking point. Certainly there are employment opportunities in R&D and in renewable power and so on, and the government has a role to support research and development in those type of activities, but to just stop expansion of oil and gas completely is a really high cost way to lower emissions. I mean, we generate significant value from this sector. It's roughly 10% of Canadian GDP as a whole, employing over 250,000 people, it not counting any of the indirect jobs. So what we should do is, I think, use the value in that industry in order to pay for things like R&D and indeed renewable power. So to shut down that sector is quite a costly way to go, and I'd say for the Green Party, counterproductive to their environmental goals.
So which party do you think has the most economically sound climate change plan?
So I'm actually a fan of carbon taxes in general, if the revenue is used to lower other taxes, and we don't pile on top of the carbon tax additional regulations that tend to distort economic activity. So it doesn't look, from my perspective, that any of the parties are promoting what an economist would say is the ideal climate plan. And so I think that's a problem, and I was sort of hoping for a little bit more on that front.
With all of the grand election promises, we see the federal leaders out there right now campaigning from coast to coast to coast. At what point would we see a return to a balanced federal budget? We'll be back in black.
So that's a good question. And in fairness to the parties, the campaign is still going on and they still have announcements to make. And none of the major parties have put out their full fiscal plan yet. So I really do look forward to seeing that so that I can answer a question like that. But the Conservatives in the past have committed to balancing over 5 years. And so that, even though they're lowering revenue with tax rate reductions, that can be achieved just with slower growth of spending over those 5 years.
It appears that a lot of voters don't really put reducing the federal deficit as a high priority. It's more the economy, healthcare, education, seniors issues, but should they?
So I tend to put a lot of weight on the deficit, and I think we should have a balanced budget when the economy is not in recession. And Canada's economy as a whole, Alberta's somewhat of a separate story, but Canada's economy as a whole is doing fairly well. And so we shouldn't see a federal deficit in that sense. But far be it from me to tell voters what they should and shouldn't consider high priorities. It's quite clear, though, that all the parties are responding to that. Even the Conservatives, a 5-year plan to balance is actually a fairly long time, given the relatively modest scale of the deficit currently.
A number of parties have promised to lower those cell phone bills. Can governments actually do this in a way that wouldn't hinder the free market economy?
Yeah, so they can, in principle, in that Canada does have a fairly protected telecommunications market. So not just cell phones, but we restrict entry from foreign companies, for example. And if we allowed a little more competition in the market, then like most markets, competition could drive lower costs. That's not really what's being proposed here by the party. So the NDP and the Liberals have proposed moving on cell phone plans, the NDP just with price caps. And while that would certainly lower prices, I think it would adversely affect the amount of investment that those companies make, and that would affect quality and coverage and so on. And then the Liberals have been a little vaguer in terms of what they want to do, but they want to increase the ability of companies to piggyback on the larger carriers' network and access that network at wholesale prices, so maybe introducing competition at the retail side of the market. And, that might do something at the margin. I'm not sure if it'll do the 25% reduction in cell phone prices that they're suggesting.
Trevor, how about education? Some parties are promising to have free post-secondary education. Don't tell my kids that. My son graduated with a huge student loan. Now, that's a huge cost. I mean, if you want to make post-secondary free, can this be funded in such a way without increasing our debt load?
So to give you a sense of scale, if we were to make tuition free, and here the Parliamentary Budget Office did cost that campaign promise, that would be about $10 billion per year. So in terms of GST points, it would be about 1 to 1.5 points on the GST. So it is a significant increase in spending. It's certainly something that it is feasible if we were willing to increase tax rates in order to pay for it. But I'm not quite sure that's something we should be doing. I mean, the education that I think students receive at many of the fine universities in the country is worth the relatively modest tuition. And in addition, this is a provincial matter. Post-secondary education is the jurisdiction of the provinces. And so I'm not entirely sure why a federal party would be proposing this measure.
Not just the tuition, but the books too. I remember when I graduated from Montreal College, now university, where you are, back in 1988. I mean, even back then, my books were $200, $250 per book. So, yeah.
Well, that's a bargain at twice the price, the knowledge and skills that you get here, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. Amen to that. Any final words of advice to voters? What should we really be looking for in the economic promises from the federal parties?
Well, I think actually this campaign has seen a lot of policy promises. So that's good in the sense that there's a lot for voters to digest. So I'd really encourage people to ask questions at the door, go on to not just the party websites, but independent websites like the Parliamentary Budget Office to see how much different campaign promises cost and how parties are hoping to pay for them.
Dr. Trevor Tombe, Associate Professor of Economics at the U of C, thanks a lot for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at PCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.